Hi, this is Steven from Data Video, and I wanted to give you a quick tour of the new NVS-34 streaming encoder. The nice thing about this encoder is it accepts both SDI and HDMI. You can actually have embedded audio or line-in audio via RCA connections, and you can set that so that if you had an audio mixer you could feed that into the encoder. Or another great option is you have the ability to mix the two. If you wanted to have embedded with line-in, you can do that. If you select HDMI, you get additional proc amp controls, which allows you to color correct a little bit. And then you can apply it or reset them. And then down here at the bottom is a nice feature, is it's basically telling you what is actually connected to your input source on the encoder. So for example, we've got a 1080p source at 60 frames with 48 kilohertz for the sampling frequency for the audio. So now over here we'll go to the operation mode, and you'll see that we're actually on the recording portion. See, that's why it's kind of not highlighted. So the nice thing about this is you can set an independent bit rate for your recording that's totally different from your stream settings. So this is basically for your recording portion, but you'll have, you can set your file name, enable or disable your recording, what profile you want it recorded in, for example, the level, frame rate, GOP structure, and you can go ahead and apply it here or begin your recording. And over here on the streaming, it's very, very similar, except you have two other options, and this is specifically for streaming. So you can enable or disable. You can set the stream type, which is either RTSP, RTMP, TS, which is a transport stream, or HLS. RTMP is probably the most common though. Resolution, you can set what your stream is going to be, either from 1080p, 720p and below. Your frame rate can go anywhere from 60 to 15. And profile, main, high, or baseline. And then basically you can set your level, anything from HD to SD. Entropy is basically the algorithm for compression, and you basically have two options, so we'll show you those there. And then GOP, which is basically group of pictures. This is essentially the keyframe interval. So one keyframe every 60 seconds is roughly what that translates out to. Encoder mode is either high, medium, or low, which are basically just presets. You'll see when I changed it to medium it went to 4. But you do actually have other options for your bit rate, anything from 10 to down to 256. Your RTMP URL, which will change depending on what you select on the stream type, and your stream name or stream key is what most providers call it. YouTube and Facebook call it a stream key in most cases. Account pass and password is usually for RTSP type streams. YouTube and Facebook, most other CDNs don't really require an account and password way to log into the stream other than going into their actual user interface. So over here, this is basically just a duplicate of what you have as for the second streaming encoder, and then you can apply it. You can either reset it or you can actually begin your streams. So now we'll go over to the CG portion, which is kind of a nice little feature, and CG is basically a character generator. It allows you to put some basic text over your video, or you can actually do a picture, like for example a small little logo bug if you want it on the corner of your video. And you actually have 4 layers that you can actually control as far as setting text, the text size, and then basically the X and Y location. 50 and 50 is actually the upper left quadrant of your video frame. And you can also select the color of the text. So we could apply it, we could reset it, and then we can control whether we want it active or not. So you can either stop it or start it. Over here on your system tab, this is where you're setting up a lot of your network settings. So over here you'll see that there's a firmware version that's listed here. And then you have your network settings. In this case we're DHCP, so that means that it's dynamically assigned an IP address by the router that it's connected to. So in this case we would leave this as default because this would all be pre-filled by the actual router, and you'll see that even though there's some entries there, this is actually the IP address that the box resides on. So we'll go ahead and now show you the account and password. This is where you would set up a new user account, new password, and you can apply it. Your time settings, how you want them to either be synced with an internet time server or manually, and your time zone. You can apply that. If there's firmware updates, you can browse for the firmware update file and go ahead and apply the update. Disk format is where you would actually format your SD card when you go ahead and insert it into the encoder, and you have 3 different options for your partition type, either FAT32, NTFS, or exFAT. And over here we're going to show you that you have, it shows the available capacity for recording, total recording capacity. Then you've got the device name, so you can set that for how it would show up on the network. And then your timeout period is basically how long before the browser, as a security measure, logs you out. Anything from 20 minutes to never. And then you can restore to default or reboot. And then over here on status is basically giving you an overview of everything that's going on with your encoder, whether it's recording, whether it's streaming, what the bit rate is that it's currently streaming at, the status of your disk, how it's set up and configured, and whether it's active. And the last setting here is our vertical video, which is a nice new feature and pretty unique for encoders. It has the ability to crop, or it can actually rotate, for vertical video. And up here we've got obviously our selection for language, and then CPU allocation, and then there's another version information as well. So that's basically an overview of the NVS-34. In follow-up videos, we'll go over some of the setup features as far as how to actually configure it for Facebook or YouTube. But thank you for joining us.